It started with a forecast no one took seriously. The storm was supposed to brush past us, a fleeting inconvenience. My boss, Mr. Callahan, had called an impromptu meeting that evening, insisting we finalize the quarterly reports before our big client pitch. I should have declined, gone home, and curled up with my latest mystery novel. But duty called, and saying no to Mr. Callahan wasn't easy. Not because he was intimidating, though he could be, but because there was something about him I couldn't quite pin down. Mr. Callahan was a man of contradictions, a perfectionist with a soft spot for stray animals, a stern demeanor offset by the occasional boyish grin. At 54, he carried himself with a quiet confidence that made people listen. I often wondered what his life outside work looked like. Did he have a family? Hobbies? Secrets? He rarely let anyone past his professional facade, and I had long accepted he was just a puzzle I'd never solve. By the time the meeting wrapped up, the storm had arrived in full force. Rain lashed against the office windows, and thunder rolled in waves that shook the walls. "You shouldn't drive in this," he said, glancing at the storm through the glass. "Let me give you a ride." "I'll be fine," I replied, though I wasn't sure I believed it. My little sedan wasn't exactly built for torrential downpours. "Humor me, Grace," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. And so, against my better judgment, I found myself climbing into his car, a sleek SUV that smelled faintly of leather and his cologne. The roads were a mess. Streetlights flickered ominously, and water pooled in the dips and cracks of the asphalt. We hadn't been driving long when a fallen tree blocked our path. "Looks like we're taking the scenic route," he muttered, turning down a narrow back road. The rain came down harder, visibility shrinking to mere feet. Then it happened. A sudden jolt, a sickening crunch, and the SUV sputtered to a halt. "What now?" he muttered, more to himself than to me. He stepped out, umbrella in hand, to inspect the damage. When he returned, his expression was grim. "Flat tire," he said, "and the spare's no good. We're stuck." The storm showed no signs of letting up, and we were miles from the nearest town. Cell service was non-existent. "There's an old lodge not far from here," he said. "Used to belong to my grandparents. We'll wait out the storm there." The trek through the rain was surreal. The world felt smaller, reduced to the circle of light from his flashlight and the sound of water slashing around our feet. The lodge appeared like a ghost from the past, its weathered wooden beams and moss-covered roof a stark contrast to the modern world we'd left behind. Inside, the air was cool and musty, the faint smell of cedar lingering from years past. He found some candles in a drawer and lit them, their warm glow casting flickering shadows across the room. "It's not much, but it'll do," he said, shrugging off his wet coat and hanging it by the door. We settled near the fireplace, where he managed to coax a reluctant flame to life. I sat on an old quilt spread across the floor, sipping the coffee he'd miraculously found in the pantry. The storm raged on outside, but inside, it was quiet, intimate. "You know," he said, breaking the silence, "I haven't been here in years. My grandparents passed away when I was in college. I always meant to come back, but never found the time." I nodded, sensing there was more he wanted to say. "They must have been proud of you," I offered, and for the first time, his ever-composed expression softened. "They were good people," he said. "Taught me everything I know about resilience and hard work. But sometimes I wonder if they'd be disappointed with the life I've built. All work, no balance." His candor caught me off guard. "You're not the only one," I admitted. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm just drifting, waiting for something to happen instead of making it happen." For a moment, we were just two people, not boss and employee, but equals, sharing the vulnerabilities we usually kept hidden. The tension between us shifted, becoming something softer, deeper. When I woke, the storm had passed. Sunlight streamed through the lodge's dusty windows, illuminating the room in a golden glow. Mr. Callahan was already up, standing by the fireplace with a cup of coffee in hand. He looked different in the morning light, less the authoritative boss, and more a man who carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. "Morning," he said, his voice warmer than I'd ever heard it. "Coffee?" I accepted the cup and joined him by the window, where we watched the world wake up. The rain had left everything fresh and new, the kind of clean slate people like us rarely allowed ourselves. "Last night was unexpected," he said after a long silence. "But maybe it was what I needed, what we both needed." I looked at him, at the man I'd worked beside for years without really knowing. "Maybe it's a reminder," I said, "that life's not just about deadlines and reports. Sometimes, it's about moments like this." He smiled, and for the first time, it reached his eyes. "I think you're right, Grace." The drive back to town was quieter than our trek to the lodge, but it wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was the kind of silence that spoke of understanding, of a connection forged in the unlikeliest of circumstances. By the time we parted ways, I knew something had shifted, not just between us, but within me. In the days that followed, life returned to its usual rhythm, but I found myself holding on to that night. It reminded me to look beyond the surface, to embrace the unexpected, and to find meaning in the moments that catch us off guard. And as for Mr. Callahan, well, let's just say the next time he called a late-night meeting, I didn't mind staying late.